What is happening, everybody? Greg Ehrenberg here from Stokastic.com. We have not one but two Monday Night Football games on today's slate, and there's big contests for everything. The two Showdown games and then also the main slate. We're breaking it all down on the YouTube channel. For this video, I'm going to be breaking down the best Showdown plays for the main Showdown contest, which I'm considering to be the main one in terms of which one has the bigger contests on DraftKings and FanDuel. That is the late game between the Bengals and the Rams. So I have lineups built for DraftKings here. We're going to look at some of the results of those, and then we'll build out FanDuel lineups right after this as well. As you come in, only thing I ask of you, this is free content. Help support me, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to sign up for all the tools and data that we have at Stokastic.com, I have a link included in the description box, and this is going to cover everything. Our player projections, ownership projections for main slates, showdowns, everything, including our contest generator in our Sims tool. So build your lineups right on our site and then simulate them as well. And already have that done here. Going to favorite the top 150 lineups. By ROI, my overall top projected lineup for today is Joe Mixon in the captain spot with Drew Sample, Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, T. Higgins, and Tutu Atwell. So a lot of offense in this lineup. Something that we do have to keep an eye on is what is the status of Joe Burrow going to be? Dealing with a calf injury. He's listed as questionable to play. At least from the team, we've heard they're going to make it a game-time decision. He's going to be going right up as close as possible until the start of the game to determine if he's able to play or not. For now, in our projections, we have Joe Burrow in, but this is a very fluid situation, and who knows what's going to end up happening. So as of now, making the assumption Joe Burrow's in. So just understand that as we're looking at some of these results and lineups. But anyway, that is my overall number one projected lineup. If we look at the lineups that are expected to be duped the most often, one thing you'll notice here, especially because I have it set as a 30% of the payout to first place, because the big contest on DraftKings stay pretty top heavy, $200,000 to first place, $600,000 prize pool in total, which is why I set the payout structure here for this sim to be 30% to first. With it being top heavy, basically none of these highly duped lineups ended up making it into my top 150. This one down here did. T. Higgins, Bengals defense, Joe Burrow, Mixon, Puka Nacua, Rams, actually double defense lineup. But for the most part, the heavily duped lineups, not as favorable for this slate. And the lineup that we have projected to be duped the most often here is Tyler Boyd, Bengals defense, Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Puka Nacua, and then T. Higgins. That is the lineup right now, projected to have the most dupes in large field tournaments. Obviously, once again, that would change pretty dramatically if Joe Burrow is not in. If we look at some of the individual exposures here, players I'm getting the most of, Joe Burrow. Drew Sample, really strong value option for this slate. He's the one I'm getting the most of by far. So if you're looking to punt with somebody, maybe you're playing cash games today, even in tournaments, Drew Sample looks like a really, really good option. He's expected to get the majority of the work at tight end with Irv Smith out tonight for the Bengals. Also, a lot more Bengals exposure towards the top for me that I'm getting to Rams exposure. My most rostered Rams player here is Matthew Stafford. I have him in 44.7% of lineups in the flex spot of my top 150. But of my top 5 most rostered players, 4 out of the 5 of them are Bengals. Burrow, Sample, Mixon, and then Jamar Chase before we get to Matthew Stafford. And then Puka Nacua here for the Rams is the skill position player from the Rams I'm getting the most of. He also is the captain I have the most exposure to, getting to 25% captain exposure to Nacua, 12% projected ownership in the captain spot. So that is the player I'm getting to the most in the multiplier spot, followed by Joe Mixon, then Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. One I'm most overweight to here, though, is Puka Nacua, who looks like a good tournament play, at least as far as our projections go for tonight's slate. Let's look at players who I'm underweight to the field to. Underweight to the field on Evan McPherson in the captain spot. And let's see, who else? Oh, sorry, in the flex spot. I think I said captain for McPherson, but either way, flex spot, McPherson coming underweight to him as the kicker for the Bengals. Also coming in underweight to T. Higgins. Puka Nacua, underweight to him in the flex spot, but that's kind of coming with the asterisk of the fact that he's my most rostered captain. So on the whole, I'm overweight to Nacua, but underweight to him in the flex spot. Underweight to Kyron Williams in both the captain spot and the flex spot. Underweight to Ronnie Rivers. So I think the way that a lot of the sims are projecting the game script to go for this game is with the Bengals winning. and with them holding the lead late, which is why I'm getting more exposure to the Rams passing game than the run game. So it was getting to Matthew Stafford, was getting to Nakua, not as much to Kyron Williams or Ronnie Rivers here. Bengals players were underweight too. Other than McPherson, we're getting underweight to T. Higgins and a little bit underweight to Joe Burrow in the captain spot, but overweight to him in the flex spot. Contrarian plays that were overweight too. Nakua in the captain, that's something that's going to differentiate lineups. He's only projected for 12% ownership. Got Drew Sample in north of 50% of my lineups when he's only projected for 16% ownership. Getting to some Tyler Boyd in the captain spot at 4% ownership. And then nothing else too crazy contrarian. You know, it's hard to find guys who are like 2-3% on that are going to be crazy overweight too. That's a good overview of the DK slate for tonight's showdown. But let's go and build lineups for FanDuel now. We also have Owner's Box in here as well, site that we are partnered with. All right, so let's do it for the single game slate for FanDuel. And while the lineups are being built, I'm also going to look to see what is the payout structure for first place for that. So that when we go to simulate this afterwards, we could go and see what percentage first to set it on. So the big contest on FanDuel today, not quite as big as the contest on DraftKings, actually exactly half the size, $300,000 prize pool and pays out $100,000 to first place. So now we have these lineups built. And these are still the DK lineups that are in here that were simmed. But now we'll set this at 30% to first place for FanDuel, considering, like I said, we've got $100,000 to first place out of a $300,000 prize pool. So 30% is fairly close to that. And then we've got some other contests in here as well that are pretty big for the showdown slate on FanDuel. So the Snap, which is a $3 contest, $40,000 prize pool, $5K to first place. If I was building lineups for that, I'd set it on either 10% or 15% payout to first place if you guys were setting the payout for that contest when you're building lineups. Let's favorite the top 150 lineup that we have with the highest simulated ROI. And there's two that are really standing out here. One is Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Drew Sample, Matthew Stafford, and T. Higgins. It's actually very similar to our top projected lineup that we got to on DraftKings. And then T. Higgins, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Drew Sample, and Joe Burrow. And one thing also that's going to make these lineups dupe, not quite as much, they are leaving $1,500 in salary on the table. Most duped lineups for FanDuel. And once again, none of these really making it into our top projected lineups. But yeah, some super heavily duped FanDuel lineups, which is generally going to be the case with FanDuel. It is fairly difficult to build unique lineups over there. But Joe Burrow, Kyron Williams, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, and T. Higgins, that is your lineup projected to be duped the most often in tonight's contest, followed here by Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Joe Mixon, Tutu Atwell. Now, if we look at the exposures of our top 150 lineups, what are we getting to? A lot of Matthew Stafford here. He is in 53.3% of lineups. But what about as the MVP? Yeah, MVP, we have him in 16%. So overall, about 70% exposure to Matthew Stafford, and then Joe Burrow as the other quarterback, getting to him in about 65% of lineups. So 65% of Joe Burrow, 18.7. So around that's 19 and 46. So Joe Burrow about flat even with the field with him in the flex spot, and then in the captain spot, slightly overweight to Joe Burrow. So getting to a lot of the quarterbacks here, two most rostered players that we're getting to on FanDuel. As far as stands, Drew Sample only projected for 5% ownership over on FanDuel. So the cheap players, not quite as necessary on FanDuel as they are on DraftKings. And we just looked at the DraftKings lineups. We had Sample north of 50% of lineups, but still here, well overweight to the field on Drew Sample, and really good-looking contrarian play. This looks like one of the more reasonable ways to differentiate a FanDuel lineup is playing Drew Sample at only 5% projected ownership. Coming in overweight to Nacua, he's projected for about 30% ownership. Got to him in just under 40% of lineups. And then Joe Mixon also showing up a bunch. Can't remember if I said that his name there a second ago. Neither here nor there, though. As far as defenses go, we are getting to the Rams in 23% of lineups. So hardly got any defense exposure over on DraftKings. FanDuel, we are seeing the Rams pop up a little bit, as are the Bengals, overweight to both defenses on FanDuel here. Other MVPs that we're getting to, so past Joe Burrow and Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, Joe Mixon, those are the MVPs that we're getting to here. Who are we underweight to? Jamar Chase. Not getting to very much of Jamar Chase over on FanDuel. He wasn't one of our most rostered MVPs, so only had 8% MVP exposure to him, and then 13% flex exposure. So 20% of Jamar Chase, about half the field, and the field is coming at 42% on him. McPherson, just like over on DraftKings, we're underweight to him on FanDuel. And then Kyron Williams, also underweight to him on FanDuel in the same way we're underweight to him on DraftKings. So a lot of similarities between the FanDuel and DraftKings lineups that we're getting to. Players we're overweight to: Drew Sample, Rams as a defense here, and then Matthew Stafford, then Puka Nacua in the MVP spot. So Nacua getting to him in 17.3% of lineups in the MVP compared to 9% exposure projected by the field. So that's a little rundown of both FanDuel and DraftKings for the Showdown slate. If you guys haven't done it yet, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget, if you want to sign up for our NFL package, use the link below, get access to everything. Contest generator, so how I built the lineups here. It's that easy. You guys kind of see the process how I build my lineups. I select the top 150 by simulated ROI, then I upload them to DraftKings and FanDuel. That's pretty much all there is to it, guys. Thank you very much once again for watching. Good luck with all your lineups. See you back here Thursday for Thursday Night Football.